Brenton, first off, thanks so much for joining me here and taking a moment to talk about some of the issues that are facing us, especially parents, but of course, all voters in
Right.
the Commonwealth and specifically up here in Northern Virginia. So could you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about, where you're running and what you're running for and all that?
Sure. Well, first of all, Fraser, I want to thank you for having me on for such an important topic when it comes to education and especially parents' role in education, which has seemed to have been under attack over these last couple of months. So I think this is a critical conversation. And I'd like to highlight to those that will watch this, whether you have a child or you do not have a child, this is a conversation you care about. You care about the direction of our precious cargo, as I like to say in my family, and that's our young people. That's our future. So to give a little bit about me, my name is Brenton Hammond. I'm running for the House of Delegates to represent the 43rd District in Virginia. So what that pretty much means is just how you have at the federal level a congressperson that represents a portion of their state and they represent that person in Washington, D.C. So it is on the state level. I would represent a portion of Fairfax County, Alexandria, down to Lorton, that covers from Huntington, from Franconia to Army, Fort Belvoir, all the way down to Lorton. I would represent that area in Richmond. And that would be where we would vote on state bills. And one of the things I've told people is if you don't think the state legislature has an impact on you, I would argue it has a quicker, more direct impact on you than even the federal level. So the laws that come out of Richmond have a direct impact on everyone. So I say that to say we want everyone to be engaged in their House of Delegate candidate, who's running for office, and why they need to make sure that they don't stop at governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. They also need to make sure they vote for their House of Representative. In District 43, I want that vote to go to Brenton Hammond.
And so I'll tell you what, it sure seems like there's a heightened interest, and maybe this is that kind of amnesia where everybody thinks what's happening most recently is the most impactful. But let me ask you this. It seemed like when we were talking earlier, it didn't sound, this is your first foray into politics, right?
That's correct, Fraser.
So do you have a sense, talking to some of the people that are working with you that have been around state candidacies or state elections, is the interest way heightened this time? It sure feels to me like people think the stakes are higher and they're getting really, really engaged. Is that your take?
Fraser, I think that is a spot on assessment. That I think the interest it's at one of the highest levels I'm hearing about that's been seen in about 12 years is what people are kind of giving me a bar for those that have been around politics, especially in the state of Virginia. They said they haven't seen stakes this high in about 12 years. And when you go back to when we started this in March, education was something that was critical back then in March, because we were concerned about getting the children safely back in school, but for 5-day-a-week learning. We were still in a situation where the kids were not in school. We saw some of the psychological and emotional impacts that were taking place. And our concern was, hey, man, wouldn't school choice have been a great option for those parents who would have rather given their child a different alternative? And education was essential back in March. And then, Fraser, what we saw from March through now, the fall, is that education has become an even greater issue of importance. Everyone is talking about education. Everyone is talking about parents having a say in what's going on in their child's education. Everyone is talking about making sure we're never in a situation again where a crime against a minor, there's discretion on whether it's reported to law enforcement. Everyone is talking about making sure we're not teaching curriculum that divides our young people, but instead teaches them the real history, but doesn't divide and create division. Education, education, education. And Fraser, here's the unique thing. This issue it's not just coming from one side of the political aisle. It's not just coming from conservatives. It's coming from Democrats. It's coming from moderates. It's coming from independents. It's coming from those not even affiliated with any political party. There has been just this interest in what is going on in our education system. And who would have thought that Fairfax County and Loudoun County would be counties now that are known nationwide for what's taking place right here in our backyard. So Fraser, you've hit the nail right on the head. Education has been, of course, issue number one, and then it kind of trickles down into public safety. It trickles down to inflation and tax increases that we just don't need right now. The education has been the top issue. When I'm out knocking on doors and when I'm out meeting parents and grandparents, that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth is education.
So I think you and I talked about this a little bit when we were talking. I think it was right after your debate when we were talking about the kind of way that federal issues or national issues kind of migrate or seep into local elections or state elections. And obviously right now, I mean, I live in Northern Virginia, right? I'm watching TV because of football yesterday. So I'm seeing commercials, okay, which I usually don't see, but I'm seeing commercials. And it certainly seems like all eyes are on Virginia, right? The governor race obviously is the marquee race, but the control of the House it's a one vote. So, this is a big sort of stage for people to take lessons, I guess. And I wonder, do you see, is that something that people are talking about as well? I mean, are people talking about like, we need to make a stand or take a stand against these issues that are, you're right, Fairfax and Loudoun are sort of in the fishbowl here. Do people get a sense that this is bigger than Virginia?
Absolutely. I'll tell you this, Fraser, I have friends and family all over this country. And when I have people out of state calling me and saying, hey, do you guys realize how much Virginia's in the news about the stakes of Virginia? Do you realize that how big Virginia's in the news on, again, the next steps it's going to take on education, the next steps it's going to take on safety and being a state that either welcomes law enforcement or a state that goes down a path of being restrictive and demonizing law enforcement? Do you realize the stakes economically Virginia has? When we look at some of the supply chain crisis or issues that are going on around the country, and it kind of seems like we're being told by the other side, the power currently in Washington, that this was an issue that we knew about and we've been working on it for months. And people are going, well, then how are we here? How are we here with cargo ships lined up and down the West Coast? And we don't want to see that here in Virginia in our ports. We don't want to see it in Baltimore just as much as we don't want to see it in Norfolk. So people are kind of looking at this and saying, yes, Virginia, you are going to make that statement. I think for the country, Virginia, a lot of people have eyes on you to see if you're going to be a state that is unafraid to stand for life. Is unafraid to stand for so many things that people feel are important, and the stakes couldn't be higher. So I would tell you that probably in past Virginia off-year elections, there would be some attention, but I would tell you, I think the stakes have been even higher this year, and that literally the country is watching Virginia. The country is going to watch which direction will Virginia stand up for. The country will watch, will Virginia push back on some of the policies that are coming at us out of Washington, D.C., and that the current General Assembly wants to go even further down a direction that a lot of people don't want. Will Virginia take a stand, and will Virginia show up to the polls and go vote, and not go vote just because it's your party? Vote because it's literally your future is on the line. Vote because it's your child's future. It's your grandchild's future. Vote because we want to be a place that is an economic engine for job creation and not demonizing the business owners and job creators that reside here in Virginia. We want to be a place that welcomes new business, not causes businesses to go away. So Fraser, you've hit the nail on the head again, and that yes, a lot of eyes are on Virginia right now, and that's why it's so critical that everybody take their duty as a citizen of this great nation to go vote. They have to vote and make our voice heard. We can change course, we can change direction, but it starts with us doing our duty as citizens to vote.
So, Brenton, you mentioned this kind of concerns about some of these issues cross party lines, right?
Correct.
And in the 43rd and in the 44th and in Northern Virginia, if you look at pure, I'm going to say party registration. I don't know if you register by party in Virginia or not, but what you can know about people's leanings. It's pretty heavy Democrat, right? It's pretty heavy whatnot. But like you're saying, you're seeing people pay attention to issues as opposed to just vote via party. And sometimes people notice, hey, wait a minute, I'm a Democrat, but I don't agree with what's being said. If you had to, and try to be fair, okay? If you had to characterize the differences between the Democratic Party candidate line, right? The what you get if you vote Democrat versus what you get if you vote Republican in this election. It seems like the differences are pretty clear. What would you say they are in education, in, as you mentioned, law enforcement, which I know is an issue as a former law enforcement officer, or maybe a current law enforcement officer. You could talk about that.
Sure.
But and then public safety and the economic issues. What would you say are the differences?
Sure. Well, again, let's start at the top with, again, the biggest issue I think of this election, or certainly one of the biggest issues, in education. I think for my opponent's side, and coming out of the candidate on their side, former Governor McAuliffe, if they made clear they don't think parents should be involved in what's going on in their child's education. That came, I'm paraphrasing, but that came directly from his mouth. That's not me making up a statement. That came from former Governor McAuliffe's mouth. And then the next day, when most people can be understanding it, sometimes on a debate stage, you do say something that maybe you didn't mean to say and you want to fix or clean up. And the next day, when he had that opportunity, that didn't happen. Former Governor McAuliffe didn't clean up that statement. He actually doubled down on it. The other side believes that it is okay to teach a form of indoctrination in making our young people look at each other by their skin color versus by their character. And our side doesn't believe in critical race theory. We don't believe that that's a way to teach our young people to look at one another. And as someone who's a part of an interracial marriage, and I have white nieces and nephews, I have biracial nieces and nephews, just due to my family makeup, I don't want them questioning whether, inherently they should be sorry and they should be they are an oppressor. Or I don't, just as much as I don't want my nieces and nephews with Black in them thinking that, they are oppressed in any way, shape, or form. When we talk about issues of public safety, you have one side that is silent when it comes to standing for the police. On the Republican side, we're not silent. We make it very clear. We will stand for the police. We want the best police officers in our neighborhoods. In District 43, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we want the best police officers. We should be recruiting the best people from all over the state, and for that matter, the country, to come here and make a good salary, a good wage, and be compensated and be protected to do a great job that is heroic. They put their lives on the line each and every day for you and for me, and we want to treat them with respect. So therefore, when you have a party, largely, I can't say it for all, because there actually was a Democrat House of Delegates candidate that did not accept the endorsement of a group called the New Majority, which one of the things they advocated for was defunding the police. But by and large, the Democrats have been silent on that. When the majority of Democrats in this district and in Virginia would 100% say they want police to be everywhere and they want safe communities. And then when it comes to the economic front, whereas we tend to think we shouldn't be increasing taxes on anybody right now, as it stated, we're coming out of a time when COVID did cause a lot of job losses. And for there to be an increase in gas tax, a grocery store tax, we're saying these are reasonable things that should not be going in place on Virginians right now. And that's dismissed on the other side. It's dismissed as, oh, it's just a few cents here and there, or, oh, the Republicans are making a bigger deal out of this than what it actually is. Well, Fraser, I don't know about you, but every cent I can save at the grocery store, that's a big deal. You know, Fraser, I'm the guy, I type in my phone number when I go to the grocery store because that gets me some discount off of my groceries. And then, Fraser, there used to be a time where that discount off my groceries, I would run over to a partnering gas station, and that would be money off of my gas bill. So to me, you have a lot of out of touch career politicians on the other side, you know, and I'm for anybody that makes success, as long as it's obtained legally, make your success to the, you know, as long as it's legal, have at it. But don't demonize folks like myself that those cents add up. I have to drive to work every day, like most of the people in Northern Virginia. And when you tell me that you really care about the little guy, but you're willing to increase ridiculous taxes on the little guy, to me, those two statements don't line up. So when it comes to education, safety, and the issue of your money, I think the Republican Party is better aligned to say, we think the individuals have a say in that. We do think the parents have a right in education, and we do stand with the police. And by and large, Fraser, the majority of Democrats that I speak to, they agree with me on that issue. It is the leadership in Richmond, it is the leadership in Washington, D.C. that seems to think go contrary to those reasonable positions.
So, Brenton, for a second you froze there. It might have just been what you were saying was so great that it just froze the camera. I'm not sure. So speaking of that, like as you're talking, you're door knocking, you're walking around, you're meeting people. You know, we were at a fundraiser, which was, you know, Republican. So you're probably talking to a lot of people that agree with you. But as you're talking to people who are, you know, your constituents, your hopeful constituents, what has surprised you? You've mentioned that a lot of people support, the things that we're talking about, right? If they align their party with their issues, they'd probably be Republicans. But what else are you discovering, or what has surprised you in your first candidacy, or your first campaign?
You know, Fraser, it's been the surprising and kind of the saddest is the fact that you'd be surprised how many shocked looks I get when I knock on that door, when I hand them that piece of literature, and they take a quick glimpse at the literature and they realize that the person that is on that piece of literature is standing in front of them. And I'll talk to someone who's been here for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. The highest I've had was 20 years. Someone who's lived here in District 43 for 20 years, they've never had someone running for office, to include the current elected official, knock on their door. Now, Fraser, let me put this in perspective in case someone wants to criticize what I just said. I don't think anybody is Superman and that you can be everywhere at every time and knock on every door. But what I'm telling you, Fraser, would be one thing if this was a one-off thing I heard, you know, once or twice since I entered this race. This has been a consistent thing of, wow, I've not ever had the current elected official come through my district. Wow, it's nice to see someone cares enough to be in my neighborhood listening to me. Fraser, if you want to serve people, you go to them. You don't expect them to come to you. And one of the things that I've done on every door, even on the doors where the person makes clear, I will not vote for you, I have still said, but still tell me your issue. Still tell me what is your concern. Because if I get elected, I will represent you, whether you voted for me or whether you didn't. And that's what I think we have right now as a problem with our current elected official, and then the party in power in Richmond and in Washington. They are out of touch and they do not realize they work for the people, not the other way around. It is not the other way around. So, Fraser, that's been the thing that has really shocked me. I guess coming into this process for the first time, I would have thought, well, sure, they see their elected official all the time. There's regular dialogue. There's it's not a secret when there's going to be a town hall and people have to go fishing and tracking down where they can meet their elected officials. Certainly, these things are normal. And I come to find out it's not. It's not. And if I had been in office for 18 years, like my opponent, I would have hoped that I would hope people would have a different message. If I had my opponent knocking on doors, they would at least say, yeah, I'm familiar with Brenton. Yeah, I mean, I see him around. So that's probably been one of the more shocking things to me, Fraser.
It's interesting because one of the things that I've been hearing a lot and about from parents is this frustration, right?
Sure.
They didn't realize how powerless they were, right? I mean, COVID came, decision made, we're stopping school. Then we're going to go back part-time, and then we switch to all online, and then it's all masks. And then you hear about things being taught in the schools, or parents are seeing firsthand things taught in the schools, and parents that probably aren't used to having to complain about things, right? They're not used to being the squeaky wheel, are trying to be the squeaky wheel, and they realize that the driver doesn't care about the squeaky wheel, So I wonder, how do you bridge that gap? Like you're saying, I mean, the people who are living in your district for the past 18 years, if they had a huge problem, maybe they would say something to the delegate. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they don't know the delegate exists. Maybe they don't know any of the how to get anything done. I think people are awakening from being subjects a little bit, right? And they're like, wait, I can be a citizen, but they don't know how to be a citizen, which is why it's so important for people like you and people like the other people who are running in what might be considered, safe districts or safe spots, to show people that they have a choice, even if you
Absolutely.
don't typically align with the party, you need to use your choice or you lose it,
That's exactly right, Fraser. And here's what we've seen. What we've seen, and I'm going to go outside of the House of Delegates race to look at school board meetings. Look at something that, let's be honest, 18 months ago, 20 months ago, wouldn't, maybe some people attend it. I know there's always been faithful folks that probably attend, but by and large, the majority of parents and citizens probably were not there. And look at the impacts that we've seen just at school board meetings when it comes to light what our children are being taught. When it comes to light that parents are being shoved out of a decision based to kind of a special interest group, and that's sadly what in many cases some of our boards have become. It's more like a special interest board instead of a school board that is representative of the children of the school and representative of our district. Look at the impact we've had just at the school board alone. Look at the impact we've had when citizens get together at the Board of Supervisors level. And for those who might not be familiar, think of the board supervisor kind of like a city council, but Board of Supervisors encompasses the county of Fairfax. I know things are a little bit different from where people come. And certain things like over in District 43, where the residents got together and said, hey, we want to say in what is happening with the land being developed at a particular location over by Topgolf. Hey, we want to say in what's going on land that's being developed in Franconia. You don't get to make those decisions without community input. And the people have been able to have their voice heard in a process. So one of the things, as sad as COVID has been, I say one death is one death too many with COVID. COVID also opened our eyes to so many things that were going on behind the scenes without our input. And I think because there was truly no checks and balances, whether it be at the county level, whether it be at the state level, and we certainly are seeing this at the national level, because there had been kind of this lack of checks and balances. We just do what we want to do, those in office. Now we see they're being held accountable. Now we see when the Department of Justice releases a memo that empowers parents to be looked at as if they are domestic terrorists. That resonates with people to say, hold on. Me expressing a right, me expressing concern gets me labeled that. No. Something's got to change. And then we see in the last week, number one, the Attorney General walk back from that statement. The Attorney General of the United States walk back from that statement. And we see the board who initially called for this type of action to come out and release a statement saying, hey, we apologize, we got it wrong. So what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is when the people get involved and when the people make their voice heard, they do have an impact and they do have a change on the direction that's going on. But we have to be aware and we have to stay engaged.
So you and I talked a little bit about this question as to sort of what happens next, right?
Right.
And I'm interested. Let's start with the what happens next if you get elected. What happens next? What is on your horizon, your agenda, in terms of things you'd like to propose, things you'd like to support? Do you have an agenda?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, if I get elected, first and foremost, it's a matter of immediately, what are the immediate needs of my district, District 43, and then largely the Commonwealth of Virginia. So for people that are aware, though I'm running for District 43, and that will always be my priority, I'm voting on legislation that impacts the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. So I want to make sure that I have a good read on what are the concerns out in Southwest Virginia, Southern Virginia, out in the Hampton Roads area. That kind of becomes your purview, with District 43 always being important. I would have told you, Fraser, if you'd have asked me this question 2 months ago, I would have had a slightly different answer. But I would say priority number one is we must fix House Bill 257. And this is the bill that allowed discretionary reporting on misdemeanors, certain misdemeanors committed against a minor in schools. So I would say this now has become a day one. This bill needs to get fixed day one. Why this bill over everything else going on? Because our parents need to know their children are going to be protected in the schools. Most importantly, Fraser, our children need to know that they are going to be protected. So I would say education becomes a day one, in particular, House Bill 257, getting it repealed, getting it fixed immediately. And then from that point on, Fraser.
Actually, Brenton, before you do, let me make sure I understand. So 257 allowed school districts to use their own judgment about whether if an incident happened in a school, if an assault happened in a school, they could judge whether or not they wanted to refer that or call in the police. Is that fair?
Correct. And just to add on one nugget, so that way someone doesn't come after me saying fact check, it allowed certain misdemeanors. So it gave some discretion on certain misdemeanors. But to the overwhelming point, yes. And to me, I'm scratching my head finding out about this, because to me, how in the world did that make sense? That even something like that would have even been proposed. But of course, it's used out of context to say, well, there were certain crimes or crimes that had to be reported to law enforcement that were deemed, not essential. Well, to me, report it and let law enforcement make that call. Right. If student Brenton Hammond kicked a trash can, we're not going to respond out for that. You guys can handle him kicking a trash can in-house. Mm-hmm. But to make a law that says, no, we're just not going to report certain things, and for that, some form of sexual assault to be included in that is utterly ridiculous, in my opinion.
Right. And that's one of those situations where it's a little bit of the foxes guarding the hen house, right? Because nobody wants, all other things being equal, you'd like to not have to report things. You'd like to not have to tell parents everything that happens if you're the principal or whatever, because it makes you look bad, and everybody's human. And so the problem is that if you have that discretion, we have situations like I think in Parkland in Florida, where, you had a student who was clearly troubled and did some horrible things, and he never got put into the system because they had the discretion to keep him from being put in the system. I don't know if there was a similar law, but I'm aware of how schools work because I'm aware of how people work, right? And
Sure.
schools are made up of people.
Sure. And I know one of the rationales behind House Bill 257 was also we don't want to, have a negative impact on a young person's record as far as them coming out with criminal records and being weighed down from the get-go. But to your point, then there are ways around that. But but reporting of a crime, no, I can't support that. So I say, Frazier, that bill would be one of my biggest focus. I think making sure the grocery tax and no other tax increases on Virginians in a time where they're trying to get themselves above water. I think about how many people had to dip into their savings this year to make ends meet. Let's give Virginians, let's give them the most money that they can have in their checks, and not have policies going in place that are taking more money away from Virginians. So it's kind of an above all. I'm very passionate about life. And I think where we currently stand, the removal of the 24-hour waiting period, that to me makes no sense, requiring an ultrasound. There's certain things on life. We need to pull Virginia back from where we currently are when it comes to protecting the unborn. And that's another area where I'm very passionate about. And then, like I said earlier, Frazier, then law enforcement is in there. For some of our state law enforcement agencies, because that's where the House of Delegate would have purview, is over state law enforcement agencies. The retirement systems, they really need they're outdated and they're not working, and we need to fix that. When we talk about some of the medical waivers for some of our most vulnerable Virginians, and that's those in the developmental disability, I'm sorry, we're still behind badly on medical waivers. There's so many things, Frazier, that these are common sense things that Virginians need right now that need the attention on. And then, Frazier, kind of one of the most important things that unfortunately I don't get a chance to talk about enough. Let's end human and sex trafficking in Virginia and be a model for the country and be a model for the world that we got it done through private and public partnership right here in Virginia, because we would be naive to think that those horrific things are not happening right here in Fairfax County, right here in Northern Virginia, sadly. So to me, let's get to work on things that matter to people. Let's keep Virginia or Richmond to its limited role in people's life. Richmond you shouldn't look behind you and see Richmond there. Richmond should have a limited role in the lives of the people, and it should work for the people, not against the people.
So that was the Brenton Hammond elected path.
Sure.
One of the things that we've talked about a little bit is this question as to kind of like what you were alluding to with regards to your opponent in the District 43, right? Is that he gets elected every 2 years and he goes and does his thing, and probably a well-intentioned public servant. We disagree on certain things.
Sure.
But unless there's that pressure, unless there's that engagement, a good chunk of the citizens in that district are not being represented, frankly, because their perspectives aren't being represented. How does that change? How do you in the unlikely event, right? You want to avoid this, but in the event that you're still a neighbor, you're still a constituent, you're still a citizen, how do you maintain this momentum and this engagement to make sure that the people of District 43 are being well served?
Sure, Frazier, I think that's a perfect spot on question. And I think how we do that is, so much of, I was passionate on issues that got me to the place of wanting to run. Then once I entered the race, there were even more issues that my eyes were open to. I learned technicalities on how to get certain things done and how this process works that a lot of folks, they don't have that knowledge of. And it's not because, by no means am I putting anyone down, but we live very busy and hectic lives. We don't have time to get into the minutia of what's going on at the state legislature and all that type of stuff. Well, Fraser, now that I've had that opportunity to really get an insight into what's going on, what I do with that knowledge now is I use that to hold our elected officials accountable. So those parents that are still frustrated and not feeling heard, well, hey, now I do know how you get the attention of the General Assembly. Now I do know some of the local groups that maybe didn't realize there are 3 other groups that are meeting on the same topic as theirs. And maybe now I can be that bridge to connect them. I can be that bridge to connect a group of parents and say, hey, do you know there are 2 other groups that are just as frustrated over here? Hey, do you know there's this particular day in the General Assembly where you can go down and meet your rep and they listen to you? Hey, do you realize where you can go now to find out these town hall meetings, or how you can galvanize people to come together and you can, in a respectable, responsible way, make some noise to get the attention of the elected officials? Hey, I know how to organize and do all these things now. Let's make sure our voices don't die out or fade out just because the election's moved on. Hey, law enforcement, what are some ways that I can help you in my community to come out to some more community events? That way we can bridge that gap. And that way it's not true that we can bridge the gap between the minority community and law enforcement. And greater, we can bridge the gap between our community and law enforcement in general, where they know, hey, you have friends here. Despite what the media tells you, we have your back here in District 43. We appreciate what you do here in District 43. So Fraser, what I'm saying is, it's kind of like once you start a new job, before you started the job, you didn't quite understand how the sausage was made, for lack of a better term. But once you've been working there for a while, you understand how the sausage is made. So whereas before you started, it looked very difficult to figure out and it seemed overwhelming, now you have an understanding. And what are you supposed to do? And in my line of work, in the defense contracting world, we call it transfer of knowledge. Well, I have that transfer of knowledge now, not necessarily to hand it off to somebody because I'm done, but I have that knowledge now where I can lead and say, okay, now I know how to put these puzzle pieces together to get this nice one big puzzle that will send this one clear message to those that are working for us. So to answer your question in a very clear and simple way, Brenton doesn't fade away in the background, no matter the outcome of this election. Brenton stays an advocate on the issues that I'm passionate about. Brenton will remain a voice for those that stop me and have a concern. And we never give up holding our elected officials accountable and supporting them too. This is not just a thing of me wanting to demonize or go after someone. No, if someone's doing something right, let's support them and let's give them that backing that they need. Right. But you're right, it cannot fade. It cannot fade. It can't not be whether I win or lose. If I lose, that I just fade off in the background with a temper tantrum because I didn't get my way. It's not about that. It's about the people's way.
Well, and I think that you made such an important point, which is, I mean, think about the sex trafficking. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's not a huge constituency in favor of it. You know what I mean? I mean,
exactly.
There are a lot of ways for us to work together, but if all we're doing is focused on the zero-sum game of the next election, then why would you work with somebody, you know? And so really, I think it's almost, we talked about it as this kind of permanent, permanent something, so that now we have to find a way to work together, which is, you mentioned the thing about the sausage getting made, and it almost feels like, it almost feels like there would be incredible value in everybody running for office, which is of course what civics education is sort of supposed to be, but I'm not entirely sure that's what it is.
Absolutely.
So Brenton, your head is blocking your sign. So if you could, I just want to make sure people know your website. Now, obviously, it's today is October 25th. We're at a week. I mean,
literally a week.
And now people are voting. How can people connect with you? Obviously, if you're in the 43rd, then you can vote for Brenton.
Sure.
But I'm turning it over to you. Tell them what to do.
Thank you so much, Fraser. Well, sounds like we're beginning to wrap up this conversation. I just want to thank you because it's venues like this that really give me an opportunity to speak and just have a conversation with a phenomenal citizen and for us to get our message out to everyone that you do have a clear choice this election. For those that want to learn more about me, again, my name is Brenton Hammond, and you can go to my website, brentonfordelegate.com. That's Brenton, F-O-R, delegate, kind of one word, .com, and read more about my issues. And I make this plea: if you're a Democrat listening to this podcast, if you're an independent, if you're a Republican, if you're none of the parties that I just named, if you're non-affiliated, you're a libertarian, whatever, that's fine. I'm asking for your vote because servant leadership is what I believe in. Spending 8 years in the Secret Service, I'm a mission-focused person. And in the Secret Service, my mission was to make sure the president went home safely every single night. I didn't care whether the president was Republican or Democrat. I didn't care whether my partner for that day, for that shift, was a member of the LGBTQ community, black, white, any of that stuff. We wanted to get the mission done. And I want to get the mission done for District 43. I'm a mission-oriented and solutions-based person. Now, I'm also someone that believes in principles. So when it comes to things as life, when it comes to certain things as law enforcement, when it comes to the religious liberties and the constitutional rights of everyone, I'm not going to waver on that for an election. But you'll always know what you're going to get with me. And you're always going to get honesty. You're going to get a straight answer. And you're going to get someone who admits if they get it wrong. That's one of the things that bothers me with our current officials. They see something wrong, like with House Bill 257, and they won't even have the audacity to say, you know what, we messed up. We got it wrong. But I'm asking everybody to come out and vote. Early voting is taking place right now. You have through October 30th. You can go to the Virginia Elections website to find out, or you can go to my website, brentonfordelegate.com. There's a link to the Virginia Department of Elections page, and it gives you all the early voting locations going on right now. So you can early vote right now through October 30th, and election day is November 2nd. November 2nd from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. I want to say this last point on the election. Just a couple of years ago, the outcome of the General Assembly was decided by a coin toss because the votes came in tied in the election. So I don't care what poll is out there. Do not take the poll for granted. Everybody, to include every registered voter in your house, needs to come out and vote. I voted early. I was out at the polls yesterday, greeting folks coming out to vote early. Go vote early if you want to avoid next Tuesday, or come out November 2nd and vote. Do not sit this election out, and I hope you will vote. And I'm asking you to vote for Brenton Hammond. It's okay to select a different name. And I can tell you this, I will work for you every single day like my job depends on it. I will not go to work thinking that worried about a next election. I'll only be worried about what's the next thing I can do to help this community. So that would be my ending message to any of your viewers watching this, Fraser. So again, thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity.
Oh, this is great, Brenton. Thanks so much.